Hello and welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be about running and alcohol and the pros and cons of that for 50-plus-year-old runners, because I think alcohol consumption has a different impact on older runners versus it probably does on younger runners. I think we've all been there. Before we get started, if you enjoy the video or get something from it, please feel free to like or subscribe to the channel, and I welcome any comments you have around alcohol, because I know it can be quite a divisive subject and quite a defensive one. Plus, if you're interested in online running coaching, I work with the online running coach, which is Butterworth's company, and I have a link in the notes below the video if you'd like to know more about that. So let's find out what you're going to learn on this video. Okay, so what shall we cover in this video? Well, first of all, we're going to look at my story, that from what I would call from a functioning alcoholic through to teetotal, and what I've learned, what the differences have been to my running, because it's all very well having another video telling you the pros and cons of alcohol. You've probably read it, seen it, done it all before. We will cover that. We will cover the facts around alcohol consumption for the runner, and ask, is it all bad? And finally, what are your choices as a runner? Yes, of course, you could drink more, you could drink less, but we're going to look at the choices. But I really want to give you an overview of my story. It's better to sort of hear about someone that's done both extremes, and by nature I'm an extremist, and I think a lot of endurance runners are as well. So I think a lot of people may be able to relate to my view on both sides, and then be able to make an informed decision about the direction of travel they want to make with their relationship with alcohol versus the kind of results they can get or not get with their running. Before we get into my story, let's just share some pretty well-known facts about alcohol, pluses and minuses. Okay, first and foremost, it impairs muscle recovery and general recovery. The pretty obvious reason is your liver is working hard, looking over there, as it were, dealing with the alcohol. It can't be looking over there, dealing with other things to do with the body, so it doesn't recover as quickly. Yet again, we all know it dehydrates. I know many of my friends think it hydrates, but over the long term or medium term, it is more about dehydration. Also, many people know alcohol can put weight on most of us, and particularly as older people, it's more than likely. It has 7 calories per gram alcohol, and it's stored as a fat. So you can pretty much join up the obvious there. It's not going to be good if you're trying to control your weight. Though many people fall asleep quite quickly with alcohol, it also disrupts the sleep. You don't get into those deeper levels of sleep as long. So yet again, it impinges on recovery. And I've spoken quite a lot of time around how it impinges on sleep. Not just alcohol, but the lack of sleep can really impinge on recovery generally. So if you're drinking more alcohol, then your sleep's disrupted, your recovery's interrupted. So you can see already the word recovery has crept up 2 or 3 times in this short part of the video. So you can tell that alcohol isn't going to be great from a recovery perspective. And as you know, I've done recent videos on recovery, on supplementation that helps recovery. So recovery for older athletes is key, and you can kind of see alcohol isn't really leading you up the path up there. Now, One of the things that is said is moderate alcohol consumption can help with certain cardio problems, not disease. It has to be said moderate consumption and normally with food. So they're just the broad facts. Bottom lining it is alcohol is a poison, and once it's into your system has to work hard to deal with it. It means that certain nutrients don't get absorbed as well. Things like B6, B12, zinc, folic acid, all those things aren't kind of utilised so well because of the alcohol. And yet again, they're things that we all need, particularly older runners require as well. Now, you're thinking, oh God, he's beating the drum about alcohol. These are just the facts. The reality is, I used to go to a fitness class for 30-plus-year-old guys. These guys were really, really dedicated, and the guy that took, or still takes, the group is really, really dedicated. But one thing I noticed as of that time as a non-drinker was he couldn't really go hard into the group about not drinking. And most of these guys wanted to lose weight, but the kind of red line that they wouldn't step over was reducing alcohol in any great level. And the reason why is it's a big part of society. I know in the UK it's a massive part. And when I gave up drinking, it really was difficult in that respect from the social part. So you've really got to divide the emotional attachment to drinking to the facts. What I've just given you there are facts. You may not like them, but they are the facts. So let's get into my story and see if you can see any kind of similarities with what's happening with you. Okay, so this is the part where I share my story, but I share it to kind of help fellow runners. I started, I would say, regularly drinking from about 25. Before that, I'd been quite a light drinker, but I started drinking most nights at home, and was a big social drinker. Right up till I was 48. In that time, I would say I had a good relationship with alcohol in the respect that alcohol liked me and I liked alcohol. And I didn't have a lot of problems with it in the respect that I could function. I could go to work. I could stay married. I didn't end up on the street. But I always used the term quite openly, much to the amusement of people who knew me. I always said I was a functioning alcoholic. One of the things that I think that I always had was a certain amount of self-awareness and honesty that I really perhaps did like a drink more than perhaps I should do. And it probably got to about when I was about 48, I was probably drinking between 50 and 70 units a week. Could easily drink a bottle of wine a night. Weirdly, I was still running and going out running, and didn't look like I'd put on any weight. As I said earlier, it puts fat on you. What I noticed as I got into my 40s, that my recoveries from my runs were getting significantly slower. And generally I was feeling more sluggish, and it generally was, I was finding that I was drinking and it kind of takes away the concerns of your day. But what I was finding was whatever it gave me then, like a lot of drugs, it tended to make me more depressed, if that's the right word, the next day. I didn't always suffer with terrible hangovers or anything like that, but whatever was happening inside me, I was looking and feeling less positive. A number of things happened in my life in that period. I decided to run 10 marathons in 10 days, and throughout the whole process, in the evenings, had drinks, had beers and stuff. But I think it had already started in my mind that I was going to cut back. what I suddenly realised was that I wasn't a person of moderation. I find it very hard to reduce things. I'm much more comfortable either doing a thing or not doing a thing. So at the age of 48, 49, beg your pardon, I stopped. Just stopped drinking completely. Now you probably think that I've got some story about life suddenly became a lot easier. It didn't. What was really, really interesting, and I'd always been very slightly built, but for about 3 months afterwards, people kept asking, was I well? And what happened was, though it didn't look like it on my small frame, I lost about half a stone in weight, which I never knew was there. And it wasn't any change in my diet, it was just purely from stopping drinking. I wasn't running as seriously at that point, but once I hit my 50s, I started to run seriously again. And the thing I've noticed since I've stopped drinking is the recovery from my running has become much, much, much better. I also find that seemingly the foods I eat seem to have much more impact in a positive way, and my diet has improved by kind of osmosis in a way, because what goes along with drinking generally isn't good diet. It's just not the way it seems to work, or it didn't seem to work that way for me. I like to use the boat analogy with my runners, because I don't like to kind of lecture anybody on drinking or not drinking. The way I look at it is, when you're young, you're on a boat. The boat is strong, it's fast, everything's efficient. And you hit a storm, like a hangover, you get through it. You have a night out, you get through it, and your recovery is much quicker. As you get older, the boat gets older. It's less buoyant, it goes less fast, and it's less good at getting through those storms. There comes a point where you either just carry on like that, or you look at what can you do to keep the boat afloat, and also moving forward. And one way you can do that is by taking certain things that you've got on board and getting rid of them. And alcohol is one of those things, or at least taking it to moderation, which we'll come to in a moment. For me, it was either on board or off board. That's just my personality. But that's the way I looked at it, is that all things aren't equal. The reality is my alcohol consumption when I was younger had less impact on me, but as I was always getting older, two things were happening. I was getting older, and I think, I definitely know in my case, I was drinking more. And I think that tends to be a case for a lot of people as they get older, that they've got this crossover where they're drinking more and their body can deal with it less, which is not a good combination of scenarios. So in the next part of the video, we're going to look at the conclusions and really the options that you've got. So we've looked at what alcohol does to the body. You've heard my sad and sorry story, but it gives you an idea of how that works. So what's the conclusions? I think the conclusion is pretty obvious. If you can consume alcohol in a moderate level, then I don't think there's any real problem. The problem is, I don't think most people really these days know what moderate is, in the true sense of it. And I know in the UK, that was highlighted for me. When you're not in the circle, when you don't drink anymore, it's not a judgmental thing. It's funny observing how people react to certain things. And when the UK government came out with its alcohol units recommendations, the reaction from people that drank was quite incredible, because they was kind of like, well, that's ridiculous, for a lot of defensiveness. But the bottom line is that I think those units weren't far out wrong. It just didn't tend to tally up with most people's idea of what moderate is. And when you hear about all these research that moderate drinking can help with this, it can help with that, they really do mean moderate. You know, maybe a small glass. And that's the other thing you see on these TV programs, somebody drinking a glass of wine and it's about this big. My mum's a very moderate drinker. She's a terrible smoker, but she's a moderate drinker. And she drinks out of this wine glass, and it reminds me of the 70s because it's about that big. Because that's the other thing is like plate sizes, everything's got bigger. So what is one glass of wine? Is it that, or is it one of these things that big? And then, oh, I only had 2 glasses. I mean, does that mean a quarter of a bottle of wine or more disappears when you've had 2 glasses of wine? Now, I'm not making any judgment. I mean, I'm just saying moderation is the way forward for older runners, I feel. If you want to drink and you want performance gains, if you drink moderately, then I don't think you've got a problem. I think where the problem is where runners fool themselves. They tell themselves they're drinking moderately, but the impact is there that it isn't. Weight gain, recovery slower, bad sleep, though they can't see if these nutrients are going in, the outcomes from them not being there show up, but they keep telling themselves they're moderate. You've got to be very honest with yourself about what moderation means. It probably does mean at most probably a small glass of wine with food, maybe a small beer with food, and that is a consistent, not Monday to Friday that, and then sort of Monday to Thursday, then Friday and Saturday's like a free-for-all, because the average is still not there. I'm not preaching, I'm just saying these are the facts of the situation. It really does come down to kind of looking at, from your perspective, what is important to you and trading that off. If the drinking is more important, which it might be, then there's a trade-off with your athletic performance, and you may be absolutely fine with that. If you're thinking, no, the athletic performance is the most important thing for me, I'm going to moderate quite severely what I drink for those gains, that's fine. Where I see the most conflict is somebody that says, well, I want to get better at my running, I don't want the decline to be so much as I get older, but I'm moderately drinking and they're not, and then they can't understand why these certain things are happening to them. They need to step back and be more honest, not in a bad way, just in a matter-of-fact way of what they actually want. Because I found, as an extreme person, the trade-off of distractions was the main thing. Drinking was a distraction for me. The moment I stopped drinking, just the way I am, I had to find other distractions. And some of those distractions were just more positive, generally. So you can do this depending on what's important to you. And I think that, for me, is the conclusion. Be very honest with yourself, what is the most important thing. Realise that as you get older, you can't have it all, perhaps like in your 20s and your 30s. So you really need to look at what is more important and adjust accordingly, and be okay with that. If the main thing is to drink quite a bit because you really enjoy it, then you may be okay with less gains with your running and your health in general. But it's not there to sort of say you should or you shouldn't. I've just wanted to outline what I've found over the times. I think I'm a good example, not as in, but of the two extremes. I've been there where I've been at a Bupa health check and the doctor said to me, you're living on a ticking time bomb. You're kind of living on your genetics, good genetics, because what you're drinking, because I was always honest, I always put on there that I was drinking 50 to 70 units a week. But that's going to catch up with you versus where I am now, where I don't drink at all. So I've been able to sort of see the benefits. And what I will say about drinking, not drinking at all, is it's not some sort of nirvana. Somebody asked me how I felt since I stopped drinking, and in lots of ways I feel exactly the same. It's not like some sort of nirvana, but then again, for me, if I'm not drinking and I feel exactly the same, what's the point of drinking? That's my logic, because by not drinking, I can be a better runner. I still wake up in the morning and feel great. So why do it? But everybody has their own decisions and choices to make. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like or subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you want any help with your running coaching, there's a link below the video as well. Bye for now.